Hi, I'm Dr. Sadhna Bokhiria, and this is LeaderVoices, a show about leaders and their infinite ability to change the world. Each episode in LeaderVoices, we dig into stories and sparks from for-purpose leaders, coaches, comedians, luminaries, and everyday heroes from around the globe. Tales of impact and failing forward, of aspirations and innovations, and the infinite and inspiring ways that social purpose leaders lead and make the world a better place. Join us today as we introduce a new guest. Today, I am thrilled to host Sahil Bloom, an inspirational writer and content creator captivating millions through his insights and biweekly newsletter, The Curiosity Chronicle. Sahil is a successful entrepreneur, owner of SRB Holdings, and managing partner of SRB Ventures, an early-stage investment fund. He has degrees in economics, sociology, public policy, and he has had a direct impact on my growth, wealth, wellness, and has created sort of a ripple effect of sheer wonder in my life. And I'm so excited to share his journey, insights, and wisdom with you today. So with that, Sahil, welcome to LeaderVoices, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. And it means a lot to me what you said. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So a big central theme in your book, which drops on February 4th, and I had the pleasure of reading, which I really appreciate you sending over, is this concept of living by design instead of defaults. And you have this really interesting family background that ties into this central theme of rejecting societal defaults. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So that concept of rejecting common convention, I really do feel like it was sort of ingrained in my DNA in some way. My father is white and grew up in the Bronx, New York, and my mother is Indian, born and raised in Bangalore, India. And they met by chance in a 2-week time span when they crossed paths at Princeton University. My mom was just about to start a master's degree there. My dad was just finishing a PhD there. And they had a 2-week window when they overlapped. My mom was working in the library to pay her way through school, and my dad was basically studying feverishly for his final dissertation defense. And my mom asked my dad on a date. And they went out on this first date, and my dad said to my mom, my father will never accept us. And my mom was so blinded by his use of the word us that she completely missed the message, which was a rather sad one. And unfortunately, my dad was right. His father was not accepting of this budding courtship and made my dad choose between his family and my mom. And my dad walked out the door and never saw his family again from that point forward. To this day, I never met my dad's parents. He has 3 siblings I've never met. I have first cousins somewhere out there in the world that I've never met. That choice to reject common convention, to reject the path and the life that was handed to him, that was sort of forced upon him, and to choose his own way, to live by his own design. And the way that my mom was with him on that journey, that rejection of common convention is what I feel is ingrained in my DNA. And so as I wind my way to this book and sharing this book with the world, that central theme kept coming through of the idea that we are all sold a path, and we are told that there is one path that we are supposed to take in our lives, and that is to make more and more money, and that is our path to achieving the happy, fulfilling life that we all desire. And that is the default setting, is to accept that path and march down it and wake up when you're 50 or 60 and hope that things went well. And what I'm encouraging people to do with this entire book is to reject that path and to create your own by design, to create your own path that is based around the things that you truly care about, not what people tell you should care about, not what society says, not what your family says, not what your friends say, but what you truly care about. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that you will never feel successful unless you create your own definition of success.
Really interesting. And I imagine as an Indian woman, usually it's the Indian family that's like, no, you can't, date outside our culture. So I imagine it must have been shocking for your mom to kind of have someone, throw that at her.
Yeah, and it was both ways. Like when my mom brought my dad to India, my mom's parents were not thrilled at the idea of her marrying an American guy. But they asked my dad, how did your parents feel about this? And my dad kind of said, funny you should say that because not very well. And I walked out. And from that point forward, my mom's parents, my grandfather and grandmother, took my dad in as like a second son, as another son. And that love that they showed him has created this unbelievable bond that I feel with Indian culture. The fact that they accepted him and embraced him in that way, and the love that they showed him, and that sort of legacy of love is very hard to explain, but is so important to our family and the ripple effect that I feel like we've created.
Incredible. So you talk about really asking yourself in the book big questions, the ones that really are the right questions to ask in life. What does that mean?
I've always had this perspective that the greatest journeys in life come not from finding the right answers, but from asking the right questions. And the reality there is actually that you already have the answers within you. You actually already know the things that you truly care about. You know the path you should be taking. You just haven't asked the right questions yet to reveal those answers, to actually uncover them. They're in there, but you haven't sat with the questions long enough to uncover them. And so the book is trying to frame up those questions, these universal questions that we all need to ask ourselves to uncover those answers for our lives. And that's important because as a macro point, this book will not give you the answers for living your life. It will help you ask the right questions so that you can come to the answers for yourself. And that's critical because every single different person that reads this book is going to engage with it in a different way. You have a different lens, a different framework, a different view on the world. The questions are universal, but the answers are all going to be different. And that's really important to how you think about your own life and how you think about wrestling with these things. You uncover the right answers in your life when you are willing to sit with the questions for long enough.
So in your research for the book, you interviewed hundreds of people. Tell us a little bit about some of the most interesting stories and answers to maybe some of those questions that you came across.
Yeah, there was a lot in the book and in the research and writing process of the book that ended up being immersed in the human experience. Stories of sitting with real people as they wrestled with and navigated a life by design and a life that had encountered challenges and found growth through them and found love and wealth in its own different forms through these struggles. And that ended up adding this texture and richness to the book that is really hard to describe until you engage with it. A texture that really feels different to me than all of the books that I've read in the past. There are a few stories in there that I just think will grab at you and really stick with you as you continue to live your life in whatever way. One in particular was a woman named Alexis Lockhart who had faced a crazy tragedy with one of her children. And the wisdom that she shared around the amount of time you have with your children and the knowledge and the presence and the gratitude that needs to come through that, I just think is hard to capture in any other format other than the words that she shared, because they can only come from someone who has experienced that, who has had a light from the other side sort of shine on their path with this wisdom. And the one thing that I just want to say to everyone who's out there listening, who reads the book, is the tendency as humans is to see the light from the other side. Whatever, you experience some grief in your life, you have a near-death experience, you have something that happens and it shines this light onto your path where you are today. And the normal tendency is to see that light, nod your head, say yes, and then go back living the exact same damn way you were before. And what I want everyone to do is to just take one tiny action. I don't care what it is. And you and I have talked about it in your life. Like the one tiny action has created momentum into every other area of your life. That is how life works. And so when you hear these things, when you read these stories, when they shine that light on your path, go and do one tiny thing, whatever it is. The book is filled with 50 plus actionable things that you can go start doing. Go do one of them and just start to feel the momentum that can create and the catalyst, the ripple effect into every area of your life.
Sure. Yeah. Some of the actionable insights that really resonated and really changed my life is just thinking about 30 minutes, right? What can you do in 30 minutes every day? Commit to it and then use the momentum and the win to propel into the next 30 minutes, whether it's the next day or so on and so forth. And then another thing is this concept of, so my son just turned 10 this previous Saturday, and the concept that you are the central person in your child's life for the first 10 years, and knowing that while you're there, in order to be really present in terms of energy, not just time.
Yeah, that is, I would say that was, so I read the audiobook of this book. Reading your own audiobook, first off, is a crazy grind endeavor because you basically are in this little box studio reading, for 4 straight days of like 9 to 5 effectively to get through. This was an 11-ish hour audiobook. And that chapter where I talk about that, it's called The Days Are Long, but the Years Are Short. And that chapter was the hardest one to get through, just emotionally reading it. There were several points where I find it really difficult to get through, but because I'm so in that moment right now, I have a 2.5-year-old son. It just really means something to me, that idea that for 10 years, you are your child's favorite person in the entire world. And after that, they have new favorite people. They have best friends, girlfriends, boyfriends, partners, spouses, children of their own. But during that 10 years, you truly occupy a special place in their world. And in traditional paths to success, it's also the 10 years when you are told that you're supposed to be grinding and hustling and chasing whatever more the world has told you matters. And those magic years are a really special time, and a time to lean into this tension of navigating the tension between your presence with your children and your ambition to go and build something, to go and do something. And that tension and how you choose to navigate it is one of the most important choices of your life as a parent.
Sure. So tell me a little bit about the 5 types of wealth. What are they? And give us kind of the rundown.
So the 5 types of wealth are time wealth. That is the freedom to choose how you spend your time, who you spend it with, where you spend it, when you trade it for other things. It is an awareness of the finite, impermanent nature of your time, the fact that time is your most precious asset. Social wealth is all about your relationships, the people you surround yourself with, both the few deep connections and then the breadth of looser connections, something bigger than yourself. Mental wealth is all about your purpose, your growth, your ability to create space to wrestle with some of the bigger unanswerable questions in your life through spirituality, meditation, stillness, etc. Physical wealth is all about your health and vitality. It's the idea that health is wealth. And then financial wealth is what we know. It is your net worth, if you will. And the important piece with financial wealth that I really contemplate in the book is the idea of enough. Really identifying what does your enough life look like for you, and building that life and building towards it as a vision for the future.
Yeah, it's really great. And I love how it's an unorthodox way of talking about wealth, right? Traditionally, historically, we think of wealth as money, 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 money. And you really challenge the reader to think about, well, what is the point? Like if you have excuse my French, but if you have a shit ton of money, like what's the point if you don't have anything else? And we've seen that in so many traditionally successful entrepreneurs, business people, where they're extremely successful in this one realm. But then when they look around, there's nobody there to share it with. So I found that to be really moving. Talk to me a little about this concept of the Liferaiser.
The idea of the Liferaiser is to have a single identity defining rule for your life. A razor as a term is like a rule of thumb that simplifies decision making. So a Liferaiser is a rule of thumb that simplifies decision making across your entire life. And that to me is all about having some rule, some simple statement that is really identity defining, in that it sort of answers the question of how you will engage and respond to any situation that comes. The first example that I ever encountered of this was Mark Randolph, who's the first CEO and founder of Netflix. And he talks about this idea that every single Tuesday of his career, uber successful technology career, he would leave work at 5 p.m. to have a date with his wife. And that was really important to him because it indicated something about the type of person he was, about his priorities as a human being, that he prioritized his relationship with his wife, with his family, the boundaries that he created. And that was identity defining for him. He was the type of person who left work on a Tuesday at 5 p.m. to have dinner with his wife. That implies a whole set of things about how he interacts with the world. So when new opportunities come about, he can ask himself, what does the type of person who never misses a 5 p.m. dinner with his wife do in this situation? That is a really nice way of thinking about responding to whatever chaos, opportunities, new projects, things kind of come into your life. We all need our own version of that Liferaiser. I walk through an exercise in the book of how to create your own version. And I'm in the process of now creating sort of some interactive materials around that exact process and helping people workshop that in the aftermath of the book launch, because it's so important. And mine is that I will coach my son's sports teams, because that implies so much to me about who I am as a person. It means that I'm the type of person that prioritizes his relationship with his son, with his wife, with his family, with his community. He prioritizes his character and reputation and integrity above all else. And it means that when different opportunities come or different chaos strikes my life, I can turn back to that and I can think about, what would that type of person do? The type of person who coaches his son's sports teams, what would he do in this situation? And I can act and show up in the world as that ideal version of myself.
That's really fascinating because it kind of reminds me of this concept of when you're in a space where you're trying to maybe overcome a challenge or face a challenge, this concept of reintroducing yourself to yourself. And so having that as a framework allows you to remember who you are and what you value. Really powerful. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that. I like that way. I like that.
So you also talk about high leverage systems throughout the book. What does that mean and what are some examples?
So systems became famous as a concept through Atomic Habits, James Clear, talking about, these daily actions that you're taking to actually build towards your goals. So goals are great because they sort of frame up the direction, but systems are what actually lead you to achieve those goals. And when I talk about high leverage systems, what I mean is the actions that have higher leverage than others are the actions that actually drive significantly higher output per unit of input. So it's the things where you do the one action and it actually creates like 10 units of output instead of 1 unit of output. These are the systems that are just more effective than the normal ones. Throughout the book, I try to share what I view as the high leverage systems for each of these areas of your life. So if you're trying to build time wealth, I have a whole guide section that is all about the high leverage systems for building time wealth, similar for social wealth, mental wealth, physical wealth, financial wealth. And the whole idea is, if you're choosing from those, you're going to be better off because the unit of energy that you put into those systems is going to produce significantly higher and better outcomes than a unit of energy put into something low leverage.
Fascinating. So thinking about the concept of being a time billionaire, you share a series of charts that break down the amount of time you spend with different people over the course of your life. Talk to us a little bit about time wealth and these concepts.
Awareness of time as your most precious asset, I would argue, is the single most important thing that you can do in your life. When you become aware of just how finite and impermanent your time is, you start to operate differently because you start to treat time as the real point of focus. You start to recognize that sitting around scrolling on this thing all day on TikTok, worrying about other people, comparing yourself to others, wasting time and energy on a sort of useless, low leverage tasks is not a good use of the precious time that you have in front of you in your life. And that awareness is, generally speaking, created through rather morbid things, which is like recognizing your own mortality, recognizing the mortality of those around you, recognizing just how few moments you have remaining with the people you love, just how few, times you have left doing the thing with your great group of friends, whatever those things are. But that awareness is critical in living a good life, because the second you start recognizing just how impermanent your time is, just how precious it is, you start living differently.
Sure. There's an app that someone put me on to a couple years ago. It's called We Croak. And 5 times a day, it sends you an alert that says you're going to die. And like a nice about death. And it's based on Tibetan monks who spend a lot of time meditating about essentially the decay of their flesh. It's so morbid and so powerful.
Yeah, a lot of times the morbid is the powerful, right? It's the ancient Romans had memento mori, which is a concept that I talk about in the book. But it's that idea of remember thou art mortal, remember that you must die, and that being not intended to be morbid, but to be illuminating or inspiring, and that's a really powerful thing.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to go in that direction and talk about the memento mori. And then you also discussed this concept of chronos and kairos.
Yeah, chronos and kairos are the two words that ancient Greeks had for time. So chronos is sort of chronological linear time, just the idea of quantitative time from point A to point B, or time A to time B, rather. Kairos is the idea that not all time is created equal, that there are moments or windows in time that actually have more texture than others, that have higher importance, and that energy deployed into those moments is more effective, it's more valuable. And that overlaid on top of those charts of time is a really powerful concept, because what it reminds you of is that there are windows when these people really occupy a special place in your life, the kairos moments. Like with your children, it's those first 10 years. With your parents, like all of these things, they're moments that you'll never get back, and these windows of time are more important, but we need to recognize that. We need to lean into them in that way as we are living them.
Really interesting. So in terms of social wealth and thinking about the sheer power of the people that you're surrounding yourself with, talk to us a little bit about front row people. What does that mean?
The concept of front row people is that the day that you die and at your funeral, there are going to be a few people who walk into your funeral and sit down in the front row. Those are the most important people in your life. Those are the people that you need to cherish and recognize in your life, and make sure that you are holding them in that special place, that they do exist. And we often lose sight of relationships. The tendency is, as you get onto this treadmill in your professional life, relationships are the first thing that kind of fall by the wayside. We stop investing in our relationships the way that we would normally invest in financial wealth. We know to invest $100 today, it's going to grow over time, or we know to invest $10 today, it's going to grow over time. But we don't think about doing that with relationships. So we don't invest in the relationship. We don't send the text. We don't go catch up, get the coffee. We don't, make the trip to see the old friend. We don't do those things. We don't invest in it the same way, when in fact, those investments in relationships pay dividends in the exact same way as these financial investments do.
It's interesting because then there's the flip side to that, where as you're growing and developing in your career as an entrepreneur, becoming more traditionally successful, sometimes you have people in your life that you have to let go. Talk to us a little bit about, how do you know when to kind of have more space because they're not really serving you?
I think the difference is just leaning into people that create energy in your life. There are people that drain you, people that belittle you, people that sort of laugh at your ambitions, that tell you to be realistic. I think Taylor Swift said the worst people in the world are people who make you feel bad for being excited about something. And I think that that's very true. There are just people in your life, as you start to get excited about things, who sort of laugh at it. And you don't have room in your life for those people. But the people who are with you, who are there, who support you, who are positive forces in your life, you need to lean into those just as much as you're leaning away from the bad ones.
Sure. So then in terms of status signaling, right? Like, we live in a society where it's constant, like you're constantly seeing all these people kind of, demonstrating their status in different ways. And it's difficult to close yourself from it because it's everywhere. Talk to us a little bit about status signaling in modern society, and what's a great way to play the right status games?
Status signaling is a part of life. Status signaling is part of what makes us human. It's the way that we organize in hierarchies. Status is a very positive tool for social creatures. Unfortunately, the way in which we attempt to signal status has been broken in the modern era. And typically, The status that people attempt to display now is through material purchases. It's through the watches, the cars, the fancy things. And what I think about when I think of status is that what you are seeking to do is to have respect and admiration conferred upon you. So you want to be respected and admired by the people around you. And we attempt to buy those things. And unfortunately, that does not confer upon you the respect and admiration that you think it does. No one has ever bought their way to a bunch of respect and admiration. Think of someone that wins the lottery, win $1 billion. They can buy anything in the world, but they will not be respected and admired by a bunch of CEOs and people that have made a bunch of money because they didn't earn it. Right? They got lucky and they won it, which is great. I'm happy for them. But you cannot buy your way to the status, to the respect and admiration that you are seeking. You have to earn these things. And so the differentiation in the book that I get across is the idea of bought status, which is status that you are attempting to buy via these things, versus earned status, which is status that you have to earn by doing hard things over a period of time. It is status that is conferred upon you via things like building a healthy, fit physique. A great status flex because people know that you had to earn that. Building a great business, something that they know you had to work for long, long hours over long periods of time to go and build. These are things, healthy relationships. These are things that actually confer upon you the respect and admiration that you are seeking from the people around you.
Sure. One of the things that you put me onto is the 5 a.m. club. And I remember listening to you one time and you were saying, like, there's nobody that you know that wakes up at 5 a.m. that's not successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think I still stand by this. People get mad at me every time I say that. And the reason most people get mad at me for saying that is because they think I'm saying that the inverse is also true, which is that by sleeping late, you cannot be successful. And that's flawed logic on their part to think that I'm saying that. I am not saying that at all. All I'm saying is that I don't know anyone who is waking up early and working out that isn't winning in other areas of life because it's really freaking hard. No one Netflix and chills at 5 a.m. You get up and you're productive and you do things. And it's a catalyst. It has a ripple effect into every other area of life. And so if you're trying to change your life and you're not happy with where you are, for 30 days, wake up at 5 a.m. and go work out. After 30 days of doing that, I guarantee you will view yourself completely differently. You will start to identify as a winner because it's very hard to do that. And being a winner and identifying as a winner has ripple effects into every other thing that you do in life.
Sure. It takes discipline and hard work. So it's not saying that people who don't do it don't have that, but it's saying, look, if you're going to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you're going to work out every day, you're demonstrating excellence and, a structure that takes determination and grit.
Precisely.
Tell us about the Harvard study of adult development that you talk about as one of the most impactful studies in the last 100 years.
So the Harvard study of adult development is this amazing study. It was conducted over the course of 85 plus years. They followed the lives of 1,300 original participants and then another 700 or so descendants. And the most important finding is a very simple, although crazy one, which is they found that the single greatest predictor of physical health at age 80 was relationship satisfaction at age 50. It wasn't cholesterol, blood pressure, smoking, or drinking habits. It was how you felt about your relationships that impacted your physical aging, how you actually felt at age 80. And that is a really powerful insight because it implies that those investments in our relationships and building those relationships are also an investment in our health and happiness in our lives. And that making those investments all along the way and cultivating those relationships is the single most important thing that you can really do.
In the book, you shared wisdom that you gathered from couples who were married for 40 plus years. I know you've been married for more than 8 years to your high school sweetheart, which I think you met at age 15, which is so romantic and incredible. Tell us about what you learned in that aspect.
I think some of the most important wisdom from those individuals was just around never keeping score in love. You can't live your life keeping score. And this applies to friendships just as much as romantic partnerships. But like the idea of keeping score with people is a very short-term way to live your life. You should go into relationships thinking about If I am going to know and spend time with this person for 30 or 50 years, how would I operate? You wouldn't keep score. You would play the long game in these relationships and really be there and support them and sit in the mud and share that struggle. And that is just such an important piece of wisdom and advice for how to live. The other one, just tactically, that I really love is never involve a third party in your challenges in a relationship. A non-professional third party, I should say. Therapists are fine, but never involve a non-professional third party like a family member, in-law, etc. Because you will forget the problem, but they won't. And years later, they will still be bringing it up and it'll still be on their mind when you have moved way past it.
Sure. Yeah, that was really powerful for me to listen to as well. So it's this concept that if you're in a loving relationship and you have conflict with your partner, and let's say that you share that conflict with a friend or family member, and then you and your partner make up and you kind of resolve that conflict, that friend or family member will be keeping score. And they're biased as well because they're always going to have kind of a stronger connection, perhaps with one or the other. And so it's a concept that I refer to as the couple bubble. So if you're in a relationship, you have to recognize that you have a couple bubble. And as soon as you allow outsiders to kind of enter that field, it is a betrayal in a certain sense because you're giving people power that they shouldn't have. And then the exception is a therapist, right? Because they're trained to kind of be that mediator. So that was great. Really powerful. What's this concept of a life dinner?
Life dinner is a pretty simple and quite powerful relationship concept, which is just to create a monthly date with your partner. You could do it with a friend if you aren't in a romantic relationship too, where you are getting together and each of you has an opportunity to talk about some of your goals, some of your challenges, some of the opportunities you're seeing, some of the things you're scared about. And then you both talk about them as a group and as a couple. And what it does is it creates a fixed cadence to make sure that you are interacting on some of the bigger picture things about your life and relationship. Now, the most common pushback with this is that you should just be able to do that on the fly and on a normal basis, be talking to your spouse about these things. When life gets chaotic, I don't care who you are, very challenging to find the time or the energy or the space to do that, to actually zoom out and think about the bigger picture about where you are and where you're headed, especially after having kids. And so the life dinner has been a really powerful concept for my wife and I, and for thousands of couples that I've shared it with over the years.
I love that. I do it as much as I can, like maybe on an annual basis, but I love this concept of really embedding it into, your regular life, not just doing the end of year life check conversation. And it's also with accountability, right? Like once you start sharing those goals, it helps to be surrounded by people who care about you and want to see you do well. And so it turns into an accountability factor. That's incredible. You talk a lot about purpose as well as kind of a central aspect of personal growth and mental wealth. Tell us about that.
The biggest misconception when it comes to purpose is that it has to be your job, that you have to find purpose in your work. And I just disagree with that. I think that your purpose can be your work, or it can be something on a higher order above your work and outside of it. The important thing is that you learn to connect with your purpose while you are at work, because you will spend a lot of time at work. So either way, it is really helpful and healthy to be able to connect to it while you're working. Whether or not it is your purpose is a separate question. So for a person that I spoke to that works at a factory who puts together widgets basically 8-9 hours a day, doesn't like his job is clearly not his purpose, but his purpose is to be a provider for his family, to provide for his sons in a way that he didn't feel his father provided for him. So every single day when he goes to work, he's able to connect to that purpose because the job is in service of that higher order purpose. That gives him energy every single day to do that thing that he doesn't like doing. That's really important because then that means that we don't actually have to love our job. And that's a pretty liberating concept. A lot of people feel so much misery because they are in this world where you're told you have to love what you do for work. You have to love your job. You have to love your thing you're doing. And that's not reality for most people. Sometimes a job is just a job. It's just a way of providing. It's just a means to an end. And that's okay if you are in that. But you need to connect it to the thing that you are actually trying to do in life, to being a provider, to being a mom, to being a dad, dad to, allowing you to experience art and go and travel and see these other things that really give you energy, whatever the thing is. But that is a really important concept because at the end of the day, purpose is about your hero's journey. It's about your distinctiveness in this modern world. And your purpose doesn't have to be grand or ambitious. It doesn't have to be so amazing and incredible to other people. It just has to be yours.
Yeah, I was listening to someone recently and they were saying this concept of if you do something you love every day, you'll never work a day in your life, and how that's just like BS because...
Yeah, it's BS for a number of reasons. I mean, first off, like monetizing your passion scientifically is actually a good way to make yourself not that passionate about it. They did this study with like kids at Stanford who really liked drawing, and then they came and paid some of them for drawing and didn't pay others. And then they came back a few weeks later, and the ones who they had paid for doing the drawings no longer enjoyed drawing as much as the ones who they hadn't paid. So like turning your passion into the side hustle sometimes is a good way to make it no longer be your passion. It just becomes a job. So I often just I sort of just, again, reject the defaults. Whatever everyone's telling you, just question it. That's all I'm asking you to do. Just question it. You may end up still walking down that path, but at least question it enough that you get to decide for yourself.
Sure. Higher order thinking outside of the box, not kind of submitting to groupthink and really asking yourself, well, why is this something that I'm, surrounded by? Why is this the norm? And is it appropriate? Tell us about, you talk about is it Feynman technique as a learning technique?
Yeah, Feynman, Richard Feynman, yeah. So Richard Feynman was an American theoretical physicist. He was a Nobel Prize winner, incredibly intelligent, but most well known for his ability to simplify complex topics. And the way that he swore by for learning to do that was to try to teach these topics. And the reason that's so effective as a learning method is because if you are trying to teach something to someone else, it exposes gaps in your own understanding of it. If I'm going to try to teach you a topic, I have to be able to teach it to you in a way that you're going to understand without using jargon, without using acronyms, simple language. And so the Feynman technique is that idea. It's that when you're trying to learn something new, you write down everything that you know about it, then you go try to teach it to someone using the simplest, most boring, basic terms possible. Then you see what did they understand and what did they not understand. That exposes gaps where you need to go deeper, where you need to learn more about the topic so that you can simplify it more and get it across to them. So it creates this natural iterative cycle where you're sort of teaching, learning, and it drives you down into this depth of understanding on a topic that is very unique.
Incredible. Yeah, I can speak to that. I remember I was a professor at Boston College and at the Mass College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences. It feels like many moons ago. And I was teaching, so I specialized in Shakespearean studies, and I was teaching Shakespeare in the classroom. And I remember just having such a shock at the difference between being an active participant, learning about Shakespeare, and then actually trying to get into a classroom and teach others about it, which multiplied my knowledge of the topic, mainly because you want to do a good job, but in order to do a good job, you have to really, understand it at a different capacity. So yeah, that's very powerful and it makes perfect sense. Let's talk a little bit about physical wealth. So you actually do this visualization exercise, and it's like an 80th birthday party, and it connects to the concept of physical wealth.
Yeah, so the idea is to imagine you are at your 80th birthday and everyone comes in, they're all there to celebrate you. You're, kind of hugging, smiling, laughing, etc. All your favorite people are there. And your favorite song comes on and everyone goes out to the dance floor and starts dancing. And the visualization is to recognize if you are able to get up on the dance floor and start dancing with them, or if you are stuck in your chair. And the idea is that the answer to that question was basically determined now through the actions that you are taking on a daily basis to either create a future where you are able to dance and where you're able to get up and dance with everyone, or create a future where you're stuck in a chair and you have to sit there and watch everyone else dance. And those actions are pretty simple and pretty boring, and you can do them for free starting today. And so that is really the call to action. It's to take those tiny steps on a daily basis, the tiny actions, to contribute to a future that you actually want.
You also talk about kind of thinking about it like a video game.
Yeah, the idea of the video game is basically you are bombarded by information that is super complex and intimidating, especially about physical wealth. It's all over social media, all the fanciest routines, complex stuff. When the reality is that the boring basics work and they're free. You don't need to worry about all the supplements. You don't need to worry about the complex routines, the, crazy sleep hacking, whatever. Just do the boring basics well, which is basically like move a little bit every day, say 30 minutes, doesn't matter what type. Eat mainly whole unprocessed foods, let's say 80% of the time, and then sleep for 7 hours a night. That's level 1 of the video game. If you do that, you're ahead. You get 80+% of the benefit from just doing that. That's level 1. And do that consistently before you worry about level 2, level 3, and moving up.
Incredible. I got to get my son. He's obsessed with video games. I got to get him to kind of use the same concept of these different levels of achievement in life. Tell us about the transition into financial wealth. Lastly, so the story of the fisherman and the investment banker.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite stories. An investment banker goes down to a Mexican fishing village and comes across this fisherman who's caught a few fish in this old rundown boat. And he asks, how long did it take you to catch those fish? The fisherman says, just a little while. And the banker is confused. And he says, why didn't you fish for longer? And the fisherman replies and says, well, I have all that I need. I fish for a little while in the morning, then I go have lunch with my wife, take a nap, then I drink wine, play music, and laugh with my friends into the late hours of the evening. And the banker says, oh, you've got this all wrong. Here's what you have to do. You fish for longer so you can catch more fish. And then you use the profits from that to buy another boat, and you hire more fishermen underneath you, and they fish more and you catch more fish. You get more boats. You get a whole fleet of boats. And then you can go move to the big city. You could take your company public and make millions of dollars. And the fisherman says, and then what? And the banker looks at him and says, well, then you could move to a small fishing town. You could fish for a little while in the morning. You could have lunch with your wife, take a nap, and drink wine, play music, and laugh with your friends into the late hours of the evening. And the fisherman just kind of looks at him and smiles and walks off into the afternoon sun. And the message of that story is typically interpreted as saying that the banker is wrong and the fisherman is right. I interpret it a bit differently, which is to say that neither one of them is right or wrong. It is about defining what a good life, what enough looks like to you. For the banker, building something big is a source of meaning and purpose. That's great. For the fisherman, he's already living his source of meaning and purpose. He has his ideal life. That's also great. So you have to decide if you are the banker or the fisherman or somewhere in between. But the point is that you get to decide. No one else gets to decide for you. And no one gets to come into your life and tell you what you should or shouldn't do. You get to build that life. And so that is really the entire call to action of this book. And the whole summary of how I would put it out to you is to just say, define what matters to you, and then go take action to build your life around those things.
Yeah, it's great. It's kind of like this concept of what is enough. And when I think about it, I think it's challenging because, for instance, I'm in CEO groups where, there's people in our group who have sold their company 10 times. And if I was to be in a different group, it's difficult to kind of get to that point where it's hedonic adaptation, right? So you're constantly like, okay, well, what was enough for me before, now that I'm surrounded with these other people, is like, where do you draw the line? How do you know when enough is enough?
Well, it has to be driven by something deeper than money. I would argue the person that sells their company 10 times, it wasn't because they were trying to make more and more money. They love tinkering. They love building things. They are grounded in a purpose that they are an entrepreneur and they want to go create things. And they could have zero money or $100 billion and they would still wake up and go build something. I had a conversation recently with a billionaire entrepreneur who said the most miserable day of his life was after he sold his company for $1 billion, the day after. And 2 days after, he texted all of his former group of employees and said, we're getting the band back together. Let's go build something. They had all made too much money. They had no reason to, but it was about the purpose. It was about what actually was driving them. So chasing more, if it's grounded in your purpose, is great. Chasing more, if it's all about money, is a road to living a miserable life.
So for people who are trying to build financial wealth, what are some pieces of career advice that you would give them to accelerate their path?
I think the number one thing I would say is focus on creating value. You get paid on the basis of the amount of value that you can create for others around you. And so all you really need to focus on is identifying problems, creating solutions, and then scaling those solutions. It's one of those three things that you need to focus on and work on. And that is where you make money. So focus there early in your career. How can you create value for everyone around you? How can you identify problems, create solutions, scale those solutions?
And what is the return on hassle?
This is the idea that when you think about return on investment, you typically just have the amount of money invested and then the financial return on that. But that does not take into account one very important thing, which is the hassle associated with that investment. So if you were investing $100,000, but then you're also having to invest 20 hours of your time and headspace every single week, the return on that 20 hours of time plus $100,000 is what you really need to think about. It's not just the money. Because if I can put money into index fund and never have to think about it, and that's going to return me 8%, and then I'm going to put that same $100,000 into a multifamily property where I'm going to have to spend 10 hours a month worrying about it, and I'm going to have to go over there if the hot water heater blows out, and it's going to make me 10%. That sounds on paper from a pure financial return like a good deal, but on a fully loaded basis, it is not a good deal because I just took 10 hours a month of time that I started deploying into this, a whole bunch of hassle and headaches. So it's a really important way to just think about your life in general.
Incredible. Incredible. I just want to say you have impacted my life. I shared it in the very beginning. And when I first talked to you, you talked about how, this concept of thinking about your parents and how long they have left. And if you're just seeing them on Christmas and Thanksgiving, you can really count how many times in the next 12 or 20 years you're going to spend with them. Tell me about that story.
Yeah, that's the opening of the book. It's the first line of the book is what this friend said to me. I got together for a drink with him. He asked how I was doing. I said I was doing okay, but that I was living really far from my parents who were getting older. He asked how old they were, and I said mid-60s. And he said, how often do you see them? I said about once a year. And he looked at me and just said, so you're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die. And I just remember feeling like I had been punched in the gut. I mean, the idea that the amount of time you have left with the people you care about most is that finite and countable, that you can count it on a few hands, was terrifying. And in that moment, I knew I needed to make a change. I knew that I had been focusing on the one thing, making money, at the expense of everything else. And that was really the catalyst that sparked this entire journey. And it's what led to me writing this book and sharing all of these ideas with the world.
Incredible. So excited for all of our listeners who get to read and follow you. If you don't subscribe already, please do. The Curiosity Chronicle. Like I said, it's been such an impact. There's so many people out there who are writing about different things and creating videos. And I was telling you about the cold plunge and the sauna. And it's just like the best thing that I've ever incorporated into my daily rituals, different elements of, sidebars and organization that I became part of after you shared the impact of that, where you're kind of surrounding yourself, again, designing your community and surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals to help kind of encourage you to follow and achieve those goals that really matter to you, and also share some of the same challenges that you go through. Dropping February 4th, you can pre-order it now. Learn how to live by design instead of default. Powerful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And a lot of our guests are going to be able to get some of the books that we pre-ordered in advance. So really looking forward to sharing. And thank you. I can't thank you enough for everything. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us. I'm Dr. Sadhna Bokhiria, and this is LeaderVoices. This show is brought to you by the American Express Leadership Academy Alumni Network and leaderstories.org. LeaderVoices is audio engineered by Robbie Ladd and produced by Crepandian team at OTVO Digital. Special thanks to Caitlin Johnson and Michael Chang. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.